Greetings from New Jersey Institute of Technology. I'm Mike Smullen, Executive Director of the Alumni Relations Office here at NJIT, and I'm very proud to welcome you to today's virtual webinar, Meet the Managers, a discussion about NJIT's new venture capital fund. Before I introduce our speakers and guests today, I do want to remind all of our guests that this is a live virtual event. If we experience any digital or technological interruptions, please bear with us as we move forward. And finally, you are welcome to submit your comments, questions, and thoughts in the chat on any one of the social media platforms on which this streams. We will look at those questions and we will refer to them and discuss them at the end of the session. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleagues Chelsea Samuelson and Will Lutz for today's event. Welcome.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks for having us. I am going to kick this off by sharing my screen.
And here we go.
All right. So as Mike said, hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming today. We're really, really excited to be kicking off the NJIT Venture Fund with this Meet the Managers event. We wanted to put this together for the NJIT community to share with some of you who are potentially eligible for investment, some of the background, the context, some logistics. So before we get started, huge thanks to Mike for helping us to put it together, Shomik from the Graduate Students Association, and Vishva from the Undergrad Entrepreneur Society for helping us to spread the word. Thank you so much. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start off with a presentation. It's going to be around 15 minutes. And then we're going to jump into Q&A with Will and myself. As Mike mentioned up front, we'll do that through the comments feature, whatever platform you're on, leave a comment. You can do it throughout the session, but we'll address all of them at the end. And I really encourage you guys to ask, because if you have the question, someone else has the question. So don't be shy. So by way of you guys getting to know us a little bit, my name's Chelsea Samuelson. I am the fund manager for the NJIT Venture Fund. I'm also the director of growth for the entrepreneurship division at NJII. In my prior life, I went to Duke for my undergrad, Asia School of Business in Kuala Lumpur for my MBA. And I was in the first cohort of Andrew Yang's Venture for America program. I have been on the founding team for an acquired travel startup. I founded and failed a for good manufacturing company, but that's a story for another day. Our whole team has lots of experience in the trenches of startups. So Will Lutz, who you guys will hear from later, leads commercialization and licensing at NJIT, and he's also the general manager for entrepreneurship at NJII. In his previous life, he got his undergrad degree and MBA from Carnegie Mellon. And then no big deal, he was an engineer and a naval officer on a nuclear submarine. So not cool at all, as well as having founded 4 startups. And then finally, we're super, super excited to be working with Justin Petway and Aaron Kellett as the first ever Venture Fund Fellows. This is a fellowship program that's funded by a very generous donation from Paul Profeta to NJIT. And they'll be working with us to help just get this off the ground. So tackling everything from conducting due diligence to marketing and sourcing and making sure that people know that this venture fund is out there and an opportunity. So welcome, guys. We're super excited to have you working with us this year. So let's start with a bit of a backdrop to paint the story for why something like this is important. And that's that only 1% of NJIT graduates on a given year become entrepreneurs. And that's a pretty stark contrast to the average coming out of leading technical institutions, which is 15 to 17%. And so we all know that this is for a broad variety of reasons. Like there's lots of compounding variables that drive this discrepancy, but NJIT has decided that building the entrepreneurial community is, a core focus and incredibly important. So what kind of levers and mechanisms can we put into place to help tackle these early stages of startup formation. And one of which is access to funding. So in comes the venture fund. We are launching a pre-seed investment fund that's targeted at only NJIT affiliated startup companies. So as I mentioned, the vision from the NJIT side of the table is accelerate a stronger entrepreneurial community by providing the foundational infrastructure that people need to get these startups off the ground, one of which is funding. So when I say pre-seed, what I mean is super early startup companies. Likely we're the first capital in for the companies that we're talking about. And the goal is to kind of fill that friends and family round, give people the time and the resources to invest in their company long enough to take it to the next level and get to that next stage of funding. So when I say NJIT affiliated, we do have a definition for what that means. And we're investing in a few different groups of people as well as one type of startup. So we're in founding teams for a given startup need to have at least one of the founders who is an alumni. And so that can be someone from any school, any program, any year. You can have graduated 50 years ago or 1 year ago. That's relatively straightforward. So if a startup has one member of its founding team who's an alumni, that would qualify. Option number two, or the second group that's eligible, would be a founder who's a former or current faculty or staff member at NJIT. So within this group, there's actually a little bit of gray space because of some state ethics rules, but we'll be navigating that on a case-by-case basis. So we still recommend people from this group come to us with their great ideas so that we can figure it out. The third group who's eligible is current NJIT students. We really recommend that students apply in their senior year so that you can take advantage of the funding after graduating when you can invest in this full time. Also, we're an NJIT program, so, we value education and that is a priority for us. And finally, if a startup is licensing intellectual property from NJIT, they are also eligible to apply to this fund. What types of companies are we looking for? So we're looking for a big impact, scalable return, but we're technology and industry agnostic. So you don't need to be in a particular industry or focused on a particular technology space. And we realize that the stage of investment that we're talking about, this very early stage, you likely won't have market traction. You'll likely not have paying customers, although amazing if you do. But we do want to see that you see and understand what your vision is. How are you going to change the world, or how are you going to change a piece of the world? And a huge piece of that is understanding what your addressable market is. We want to see solidly large addressable markets because that's one of the key indicators that this could turn into something bigger. In terms of scalability, just so that we understand and agree upon what that means, we're looking for business models that allow a startup to multiply revenue numbers with minimal incremental cost. That is not necessary for this investment, but it's a good business model framework to keep in mind. And finally, but not least at all, we're really looking for well-rounded and tenacious teams. So you need to show us why this team that you've put together is the team to take this product to market. In a lot of cases, this might look like making sure you have compatible founders. So if you're a technical founder, you need a business founder alongside of you and vice versa. But teams are much more dynamic and nuanced than that. That's just a foundational principle to work from. Here's a little bit on the terms of what we'll be investing. $75,000 per investment. And this is a standardized number. We're not going to be defecting from this. That will be the investment that we're offering. And it's going to be in the form of a SAFE. So that stands for Simple Agreement for Future Equity. This type of funding mechanism was founded created, I guess, by Y Combinator, which is one of the larger accelerators. And it's a way to put money into very early stage startups without having to price what that company is worth. So what that means is we'll give you this $75,000 now, and at a future conversion date, likely your first price round, we will receive equity at a discount for taking the risk with that early money in. We're going to be deploying up to 6 of these per year, although we don't have to deploy any. So it's really important to us to be getting these conversations, having you guys reach out to us, tell us what you're working on, because we absolutely want to deploy as much money as possible into these startups that are going to do amazing things. I would say if this slide and some of these terms are slightly confusing, go ahead and do some Googling on this before you come and talk to us, just so that you have some foundational knowledge as we're going into the conversation. What's the process look like? So this takes around 3 months, but plus or minus. There's got to be some flexibility there depending on a variety of factors. But where it starts is that you guys apply for funding. So you email us with your deck and any other relevant collateral. We'll then set up an intro call. And at that point, we'll start to conduct due diligence on your company. That involves asking you guys additional follow-up questions, as well as our own back-end research. At any point during this process, we could ask you to go back to the drawing board. So we would defer doing any sort of investment in you guys for the time being and ask you to continue to work on things. But after due diligence, we also have 2 pathways that startups could take. If you are working on a highly technical startup, so likely something that's coming out of a lab, we might put your startup through review from our technical advisory committee. That group is made up of representatives from each of the university schools, and they are going to help us analyze the technical feasibility as well as maturity of your technology. Are we ready to take this thing to market? So if you pass through that stage gate, or if you do not have a technical company, you then go to the investment committee for review, who's the group that makes the final go, no-go decision on investment. And that's 5 individuals from the venture community, as well as from the new NJIT Board of Trustees, who will make that decision. If you pass through that, we will then deploy some funding for your startup. And so what does it mean if your startup receives funding? It means that we're going to support you. So you are now part of our portfolio, and we will help you get additional investor connections, hiring support. You'll receive a year free at VentureLink. But the truth is that every engagement here is going to be very unique depending on the needs of your startup, as well as the capacity of our team. So it's going to be an a la carte experience for each startup, but we will absolutely support you. And so what happens if you do not receive funding? We will still support you. So we'll provide feedback and guidance. As I mentioned up front, this venture firm is really about building the entrepreneurial community at NJIT. We want you to build these companies, so we'll provide feedback and guidance. We'll help guide you also to programs that might be able to help you fill some of the gaps so that you can come back and apply again in the future when you have taken the startup to the next level. We do have a few restrictions that we know about in terms of deploying funding. One of them is we cannot invest in student-led startups if the student is on an F1 visa. So that's not permitted under the visa restrictions. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, there are some gray spaces with faculty that we are navigating, and we're in conversations with the State Ethics Commission. And we're going to handle that on a case-by-case basis. We absolutely need and must work within the guardrails of the law, but we're also very keen to figure out how to make these investments into the top startups work. So we'll work with you guys on this, and we'll do our best to figure it out. And then finally, alumni living internationally or startups registered internationally, we can also not invest in those individuals or those startups. One question that's been asked to me a few times, and this is the closer before we get into the FAQ, is what is the difference between the venture fund and venture link? And I think that that's a great question. And our team crosses both of those entities. So good to clarify. The venture fund, which is what we've just talked about, is a funding vehicle for startups. So you come to us when you are seeking money to take your startup to the next level. Venture Link is a co-working space as well as programming to help kind of plug the holes in your business. So when you're thinking about these two things, venture fund, think about financing. Venture Link, think about space and programming. And that's the difference between the entities. And finally, if you have an idea, you're working on a startup, you want to apply, we're 100% accepting and open to conversations now. So email the venture fund at njit.edu, send us your deck, other relevant collateral if you have it. Or if you have other questions, you can email either Will or myself directly at the emails here. We can also put them in the chat when we move over to that. But we're going to go ahead and jump into FAQ. With that, I'm really looking forward to seeing what kind of questions you guys have.
Fantastic. Chelsea, thanks so much.
No problem.
And we're seeing in the comments and already a lot of questions coming in. And I just want to jump in. I'm really excited about this. Lots of great questions coming in. So the first one I want to ask, someone asked, can graduate students participate? We already kind of talked a little bit about, and then they asked more about U.S. citizens and green card holders. So we already kind of addressed that about international issues and deploying capital international. That is a problem, not so much with us as much as it is with U.S. investment law. But as far as graduate students go, we love graduate students. I would love to invest in graduate students. That's great. We really want people to be able to be full-time on their company or have staff that's full-time on their company. We don't want you to be, I don't want someone to be juggling classes and their research work and their startup. This is for folks who are really ready to get serious about it. So that's really that. I hope I answered that question. Chelsea, do you want to take this next one? What % of equity are you seeking?
Yeah, so I'm not seeing that, but yes, I've got it. So because of the way that we're doing the investment, we are not going to be taking a % of equity right now. So what I highly recommend you do is Google Safe Notes, Simple Agreement for Future Equity. We will be providing you investment now, and then at a conversion date in the future, which is likely when you raise a priced round, which is when they say your company is worth this much money, we will then receive equity at a discount.
Yeah, so the whole point is it's too early to argue about what a company is worth and what percentage do we get, what percentage do you. This is a very founder-friendly term. It's become industry standard for early stage tech and early stage investors recently. And we want to make sure that our NJIT community has the best opportunity to move forward. I want to jump into the next question because this is really in my wheelhouse. Next question that I'm looking at here, what are the resources to help with pitch deck best practices? The answer is that's what VentureLink's for. That's VentureLink, the incubator. We run a lot of workshops through the year, and we do a how to pitch to investors workshop twice per year. If you go to venturelink.org on the website, sign up for our newsletter, look for events. There's a lot of stuff to help you guys get prepped for that. That's exactly what VentureLink's for.
Yeah. And there's a few straightforward questions on here. You do not need to be incorporated in New Jersey. You just need to be incorporated in the United States.
And we love it if you aren't incorporated yet. If you're not ready for that yet, we can help guide you to resources on how to do that. Now, when the check actually gets cut, yeah, you need to be incorporated. But in the meantime, on that process, we have lots of lawyers that we work with, lots of experts in startup law, lots of experts all over the place, lots of programs that can help to guide you and teach you about how to do that properly. And so most people are registered in Delaware because that's very investor friendly, and then are registered to do business in New Jersey. That's usually the standard that we'd love to see, and we can help talk to you about why that is, and get you some resources?
The timeline is now. You are now able to apply for funding. It will take up to 3 months, potentially plus or minus one there, to deploy the funding, because it has to do with convening the different committees at their cadences. So we're not as fast as some funds, because we do have some steps that we need to take being tied to the university, but we'll do our best to get it to you quickly.
Chelsea, here's a question coming up. Do you have a preference of startup as to whether it provides a service or a product, etc.? Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, we're super happy. If you're a service startup, product startup, bring them all on. We want to see them. What we're looking for is big impact, scalable returns, solid teams, large addressable markets, but we're technology and industry agnostic.
Awesome. Will you be able to invest in single founder startups?
Potentially. As I mentioned during the presentation, we do really value teams that have multiple different skill sets on their founding team, because it shows us that you have the breadth to tackle the different pieces of what it takes to start a company, but you're not precluded from investment if you're a sole founder.
Got it. Excellent. I know I'm trying now. I ended up being moderator, and now I'm like, it's like oh, got it. Yeah, and I know the answer. I'm going to take this next question. R Square Media is asking, are we open to nonprofits also? And because investments require returns, the way that it is structured, we cannot, because it's not really an investment then. It would be a donation, I guess, or a grant of some kind. And so I love Zebra, what are now called Zebra startups, or mixed mission startups, where you're balancing social impact and at a revenue stream that makes sense. But we can't make direct grants or donations to nonprofits.
There's an interesting question here. If we develop intellectual property, will NJIT require assigning the IP to them? If you develop the intellectual property at NJIT through the utilization of resources on NJIT has ownership over that intellectual property, although Will can speak to this better than I can. But if you are, for say, like an alumni-led startup, and we've invested in you and you develop intellectual property, we do not own, NJIT will not own that intellectual property. We will just have ownership in the startup.
Yeah, so I run the IP office. Hi, nice to meet you. So, or at least our team does. Yeah, we don't want your IP. Oh my goodness, no, I want you to run with it. I want you to run with it. As the founder and the inventor, you're the best person to run with it and turn it into an entrepreneurship, a startup rather. I want you to be awesome with it. NJIT, we don't want your IP. We absolutely do not want your IP. So somebody does ask a question, but one of the founders is NJIT faculty, and the IP is developed independently. That gets into some of the nuances of IP policy at NJIT. And what I would recommend is that you come and reach out to me or Chelsea or Sanjeev, who's our IP attorney and is really fantastic. One of the three of us can help you kind of navigate that to figure out where the nuances are, because there's a lot of like little parts of that question. And so that's IP stuff. I kind of want to we talked about it. I would like to get back to the venture fund stuff.
Well, actually, just very quickly, there's are faculty eligible for participation in VentureLink for assistance in pitching? Absolutely. Oh, yeah. So are alumni. So come to us if you're faculty, students, alumni, whatever. We're happy to work with you.
We have a lot of alumni up at VentureLink. We have a lot of alumni that kind of hang out and bounce around and chat with us and engage with us all the time, whether it's with commercialization of their IP or a crazy idea that they have outside of work. That's our job, is to support you with that. And this venture fund that we're talking about today is an important piece of that, but is not the only piece of that. So there's a lot that goes into it, and we really want to support you in that case. I'd like to move on to another question about conversion cap and how it's decided. and how it works. So there is no conversion cap. There is no conversion cap. We do use a discount. It's actually a sliding discount scale between 80 to 70% for those of you who are the finance nerds in the room. But there is no conversion cap because I don't want to accidentally de facto value a company, which is what conversion caps have kind of become in the past maybe 5 years at the convertible and safe level. So we don't do that. We try, unless there's some weird mitigating weird circumstance, we don't negotiate terms. Chelsea and I have put a lot of work into and worked with some great attorneys who do this with a lot of universities, to make sure that we have professional, standardized terms for several reasons. One is make sure that we're fair to everybody. I don't like playing favorites. Two, it minimizes legal costs of negotiation. And we want you at the early stage of your company to minimize those sorts of costs. So that's why we've designed this to be as standard as possible. Yeah, there was another question that was part of that comment, Mike. If you don't mind pulling that back up, that was good. Yeah, there we go. Chelsea, you want to take that second half?
Yeah, so although it's not a hard and fast rule, we recommend companies come to us when they're under 250,000 in dilutive funding to date.
There's a question here: at what stage of project, idea stage, prototype, testing of potential users, polished product, will be most appropriate to apply for the venture fund? Chelsea, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so we're looking at very early companies. So we're not funding research and development. So because this is university affiliated, I do think it's important to make that differentiation. We're not funding research and development, but you don't necessarily have to have paying customers, although you could. So it's somewhere in that in between, but there has to be a story and a vision, and you kind of have to have an idea for where you're going, what the model is going to look like before we'll deploy the funding.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. There is next question here I'm going to jump into. Would you consider funding startups where NJIT as alum is not the co-founder but an advisor for?
No, sorry.
No. Yeah, that one's a pretty clear no-ski now that I'm reading it out loud.
There's another. Can a same founder apply again if she or he has been approved for funding in another startup? Yes, but you couldn't be actively working on that other startup and receive funding for this startup because that doesn't look very dedicated.
Yeah, we want to have dedicated, mature, professional people working on their companies, and those are the types of companies and founders we want to support. And so that's actually really important to us. We want this to be your full-time job. And that's part of the vision for this. We want to free up people who maybe you had to go get a job or go get a career and you didn't get the chance to work on your startup after graduation or while you're an alumni or whatever. We want you to be able to free yourself up to work on your startup idea. And that's exactly what money like this is for. There's another question here. Are ventures based in California? Do we need to move to New Jersey? No.
No.
That's an easy one. No, not at all, actually. If you're associated with NJIT in the 4 ways that Chelsea spoke of, we will. You're on the list. You're in the door. Come on and apply. We'd love to have you, whether you're in California, Saskatchewan. Actually, Saskatchewan's no good because it's technically international. Dang it.
No, it's definitely international.
It was the silliest location that came off of my tongue.
Okay.
At the moment.
We have another question, which I think is a great one. I did not go to NJIT, but participated in the NJIT Lean Startup Accelerator last year. Would I be eligible? No, I'm sorry. It has to be a credentialed program, unless your startup is licensing intellectual property from the university.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Absolutely.
asking that, though.
Although the Lean Startup Jumpstart program, which Mike Ehrlich runs in the New Jersey area, northern New Jersey area, is a phenomenal program. And whether you're associated with NJIT or not, it is a great resource for training and coaching and learning about the Lean method.
Right.
I love when companies say that they went through that.
I'm also seeing two questions here that are related to the investment size. The checks to a single startup will be $75,000. It's not going to be any different than that. $75,000.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to scroll up and look at some more questions here. Okay.
If there's an undergraduate student who would like to participate, should we first take our plans and ideas to VentureLink? That is a great idea. Because you get to know our team, you'll get to know some best practices, and you have some time to work on your company while you're an undergraduate to then apply for this funding upon graduation. So yes, absolutely. Definitely take them to VentureLink. You don't have to go through VentureLink to apply for the venture fund, but it's a recommended pathway.
Yeah. Somebody asked about single co-founder companies. I think I saw that somewhere. We answered that one? Okay. Dang it. All right.
I see one more that we haven't answered, which is, does being an adjunct professor qualify as being faculty? Yes, it does. Which also means that you're subject to some of the gray space in the ethics rules, but you can still apply for funding.
And we will work with the professor, the ethics office, the faculty, the state ethics office. We will work with them to figure out how to navigate that. The ethics officer at NJIT is a lovely human, and she's really excited about this project and has been working with us as we get the fund going. And so we're really excited about working with her about that. Okay, I think oh yeah, there's Mike. Excellent.
Hi, everybody. So real quick, just to all the folks who have been submitting questions, I want you to know that we are going to put this video back up on NJIT's YouTube page, on our alumni YouTube page. We will rebroadcast this across social media. You are welcome both to submit future questions and comments in the comments section of those videos. You are also welcome to contact Chelsea and Will directly, and we will share their contact information as we share out those videos. And we're also going to break up this video so you can see the individual questions and the relevance to the audience. Are there any other questions, Will or Chelsea, that you guys would like to cover? Feel free, and then I'll put those up on the screen. If not, folks, this is not the end. This is only the beginning, and we'll be able to put you in touch for more questions and more details as soon as the event concludes.
Yeah, so there's one more there's just one more question right at the end there that I do want to address, which is just rehashing some of this stuff. Is what's the email? And so Chelsea's email, chelsea.samuelson@njii.com. Mine is william.lutz@njii.com. Or you can email the VentureLink program info@venturelink.org. If you have any questions.
Well, the venture fund email.
Right, sorry.
It's venturefund@njit.edu. But so all of those emails are going to get you to the right place. Thank you, Mike, for changing that bottom bar. And yeah.
Happy to do it.
It's really, we're at the beginning phase of this. We're very excited. If you have a startup or an idea, please come apply. It doesn't disqualify you. We'll give you feedback if it's not the right fit and help you along. We'd love to have you. Yeah, that's my kind of wrap up sentiment there.
And Chelsea and Will, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It's been a real pleasure having you on board.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, it was fun.
So again, this has been our latest virtual chat with Will Lutz and Chelsea Samuelson, who are heading up NJIT's newest venture capital fund. We've answered numerous questions here today. Please bear in mind that you are welcome to reach out to them at the emails that are scrolling at the bottom of your screen. We will also share that information across all of our social media channels, and we encourage all of our viewers to share that with friends, family, alumni, fellow students, faculty, or staff who may also be interested in this launch. Now, something Will and Chelsea and I spoke about briefly before we actually did this event is alumni are truly a great audience for this venture capital fund. This is an historic investment for the university. It's certainly something that we hope to expand and to grow. And personally, as Director of Alumni Relations, I can't wait to see this take shape and really grow at the university, because it establishes us both as a leader in our area and also against our peer schools who are pursuing things very much along the same line. So, for those of you who are interested in participating, for those of you who just want to communicate about it, or for those of you who are looking to say, I am proud of my university, this is the place you want to be, and this is the information you want to share. So, again, as I like to say at the conclusion of all of our events, please stay in contact. Make sure that you follow us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Check out our YouTube channel at NJIT Alumni or the NJIT YouTube channel. Follow us on our LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter accounts, as well as Instagram. And last but certainly not least, go Highlanders.